Hello, Martha Clara.
Hello.
Hey, Connie.
Hey.
I can hear you guys. Good morning, good
Okay.
afternoon.
Good morning.
Good
How are
afternoon.
you?
I'm great. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining. I'm going to kick us off. I am Jennifer Lotito. I am the president and COO of RED, the organization co-founded by Bono and Bobby Schreiber to bring companies into the fight against AIDS. I want to welcome everybody to the first of our multi-part conversation. You know what, Connie? I think I'm going to have you go on mute for just a second, just because there's a little bit of feedback. Anyway, I want to thank you guys, thank everybody for joining us today for the first of our multi-part conversations, a series that we're calling Red Talks. That is thanks to the support from ViV Healthcare. This series is going to explore the state of the AIDS fight, its impact on marginalized communities, especially girls and young women, and present opportunity to really spotlight the need for investment with the Global Fund's upcoming replenishment conference later in the fall. So just as a little bit of background, 2 years into the pandemic, COVID-19 has threatened lives and livelihoods, as well as the hard-fought progress in the fight against diseases like AIDS. We recognize that if we want to end the threat of pandemics once and for all, we must invest in building up our global health systems. And companies and their consumers have a very important role to play in all of that. So today I want to welcome two extraordinary activists, AIDS activists, who are an inspiration. I'm sure it's going to be an inspiration for all of you, just as they are an inspiration for me. Martha Clara Nakato and Connie Mudenda. Connie, I have known for over a decade, but Martha Clara, I'd like to welcome you as well. And thank you so much for both being here today. Connie, I'm going to start with you. As I know, you were born and raised in Zambia. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what the healthcare system was like there when you were younger. And also, do you remember the first time you heard the phrase HIV? Over to you, Connie. Oh, and I think I put you on mute before, so you get to come off of mute now.
Sorry. Thank you. And I really appreciate you having me here today. And I think my first encounter, or the first time that I heard about AIDS was, I think, in 1982. And I was 12 years old when we had the first death in Zambia, when the first person died from AIDS in Zambia. It was pretty scary, reasons being that we did not have enough information. We did not know what was going on. We didn't know how somebody can actually contract this disease. And they had pictures that were really scary on how a person that has AIDS would actually look like. So it's like that instilled a lot of fear in us, me particularly. And I was really scared of every person that I met because I didn't know. And whoever fell sick was a threat to me. I didn't know if they had AIDS or not. But a few years down the line, I think I was 17 years old. That's when I had a real encounter with what AIDS was really all about. When my sister fell sick, she was sick for 3 years, and then from the time that I was 15 up to the time that I was 14 up to the time that I was 17, that's when she died. And looking at her every day, nursing her every day, without really knowing what was going on, because one, I was young. Two, I had no information. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know that she had AIDS. I didn't know. And it was really painful actually watching her suffering, and that we are putting in the best, but not having any help because there was no medication that was working. We'll take her to the hospital. They'll give her, maybe she's got fever, they'll give her malaria drugs. Maybe she's got diarrhea, they'll give her diarrhea drugs. But because she was too wasted, she was far gone. Those medicines were not working anymore. And I could actually feel the hopelessness that actually went with the disease from that time. I could see my mother, who was a nurse actually, and looking at her, lamenting, trying, you know, everything that she could for her daughter, but it wasn't working. And it was really a very, very sad situation for me and for everyone as a family. So I truly believe there were a lot of other people that were going through what we were going through because there was no medication, there was no treatment, there was nothing. And usually you'd find that if somebody fell sick in town and their illness was prolonged, regardless of whatever it was, even without them having been tested, they'll be taken to the village so that they could go and die. And there was actually a saying that they had put up in one of the local language where they said they would call AIDS as karaye noko, actually meaning that once you fall sick, you just go and say goodbye to your mother because you are dying. So you can imagine people talking about you in that manner and people scared of touching you because they feel they would get HIV by touching you. So there was, apart from the despair, there was a lot of stigma, there was a lot of discrimination, and a lot of people were actually dying without their loved ones with them because everyone was scared. They didn't want to contract the disease. They did not understand how it can actually be passed on. So uh, fear was what was driving everyone at that particular time. And it wasn't good. It was a very nasty experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank
we'll
you.
get to a little bit, you know, where we are now. But before we do that, thank you, Connie, for sharing that. Martha, I'd love to turn it over to you. Obviously, growing up in Uganda, I know from your story that you were introduced to AIDS at a very young age. Could you tell us about your childhood as well as your mother?
Thank you, Connie. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Glad that we are having this conversation, and really thank you for having me, but also for having the two of us to speak about this. For me as an individual, I really got introduced to HIV at a very tender age. But also, as Connie highlighted, you know, the terror, the fear for even you to be a child to get to know. So even at that point of watching my mom died, like my mom really died a sad death. I still till now recall those images of her having tuberculosis, you know, having sarcomas, and having 8 months of her locked up in a hospital without even us having access to her. And my dad really, as a parent who is really caring, having, you know, that responsibility to even continuously lie to us and say, oh, your mom has lung cancer, you're not going to be able to see her, and you know the disease she's having is highly infectious, that is why she's locked up in the hospital. And really looking at all those dynamics, I would say I really didn't enjoy my life as a child with my mother. And I want to feel like as I grow now, I really feel like AIDS ripped me of that, and really re-echoing that terror, the fear for even we the children to get to know what HIV AIDS was. Like it seemed more of like a curse, a fear, you know, like people even talking about it during those days. Like it was quite saddening for the children. And for me, I would really want to highlight that the terror, the fear of all that, but also re-echoing more on the naivety that I had as a child, that my dad made me believe that my mom was actually suffering from lung cancer and not AIDS. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting in terms of how people deal with it, and certainly then, although I'm sure there's still issues that we're going to need to address, and we can get into that. But thank you, Martha, Clara, for sharing that. So let's talk for a second about treatment. For those of us who have followed the story of AIDS, we recognize that testing for HIV and treatment became quite widespread in the United States and other parts of the world in the 90s. But yet it took many, many years for that to reach sub-Saharan Africa. Connie, you shared the story of your sister, and obviously years later, unbeknownst to you, both you and your husband were diagnosed HIV positive. Can you talk a little bit, Connie, about how you first learned about your diagnosis and what your reaction was? Connie, you're on mute.
Here in Zambia, we have what we call VCT, which is voluntary counseling and testing. So a person really has to volunteer to go and test. And I was found in a situation where I could not volunteer to go and test, but I had to go and test because I had to save a life. So in 2003, my husband fell sick. And when he fell sick, he was seriously sick. He was sick. And at the hospital, there was nothing that they could do for him anymore. So this is a man who was really sick with my mother. So one time, my mother talked to him and asked him if he could go for a test. 2004, and we had started hearing rumors that there were drugs for sale. And as you know, those days they would actually say the medicines are too expensive, and only rich people manage to buy the medication. So my sisters, I have two sisters in the UK who volunteered to say they can be able to be buying medicine for him. Tried to talk to him so that he could go for a test. And he gave a condition that he's only going to go for a test if I go with him. So you see, for me, whether I was ready or not, I really had to do that. He would have died. So I went, and both of us were tested, and the results were positive. Um, after getting the results, I was not really scared, really. For me, I think it was a relief. I knew what was going on. And the reason why I say this is because I think I had been living in a world of suspense for a long time, and I had a lot of doubt, and I really needed to do something that would be able to convince me and to put my mind at rest, whether negative or positive. I am one person who got married when I was very young, and in that marriage, I had children. And those three children unknowingly got HIV. I unknowingly gave them HIV. I did not know my status. And I fortunately transmitted HIV to my children. And lost them in a very short period of time. I lost two actually in 1 year. And when I lost my third child, the last child, people started talking. People would talk, and already there was a lot of stigma going, and they started saying that she cannot lose all her children just like that. She's got AIDS. That is AIDS. So she's the one that is going to. So ahead of that talk, and I really did not dispute it, I started thinking that in the same lines, where I would say it's not normal for somebody to lose all her children. There should be something really wrong. And maybe I might have AIDS. Because then, no matter how much we say that there was voluntary counseling and testing, people were not going for testing. Pregnant women or pregnant couples were actually determining their status by the health of their child. If a woman is pregnant, gave birth to a healthy child, then they'll say that they are okay. So if a woman gave birth to a sickly child, then they'll start thinking that they're okay. So that's how people diagnosed my HIV. And I started thinking in those lines as well. So, well, it's not normal. There should be something really wrong. And I had a bout of the shingles. They attacked me. And then I had TB. And then I had the shingles again. So, after going through all those things, I convinced myself, okay, this is it. This is it. I'm dying of the AIDS. Okay, now I have AIDS, but I did not have the courage to go for test. And the reason why I
Oh, yeah, frozen. Let's give her a second, see if it catches up.
I
Connie,
wouldn't
there?
want to go for a test.
Oh, sorry, Connie, you just froze for a second. Back now.
Oh, okay. So I really didn't want to go for a test, come back home, sit, and wait for death. You know, because I think the anxiety would be too much. Because it seems like I would just be every time I would have maybe a headache or I'd have diarrhea or I would have fever. I would think that okay, this is the beginning. It has started now. So I didn't want to put myself through the stress. I said I will not go for a test. I have all the signs right to right, but I will not go for a test. There's nothing that anyone can do for me. Everyone is dying. So let me wait for death and it will find me wherever it will find me. So when this man fell sick, fortunately, they had in the government hospital, the teaching hospital, they had ARVs on subsidy, which we willed buy. So when we tested, for me, it was actually a relief. One, I was sure of, oh my God, I knew that I have it. And I really needed to think ahead on how I'm going to live my life. And that was the most important thing because I knew that I was positive and I had to prolong my life as much and as long as possible. And I really didn't patient there and then because my CD4 count it was high. We needed treatment immediately. But the relief that came with the cost, I think that is what helped me move forward and forge ahead. It took me, I think, 8 months after testing for me to actually um, be put on medication. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. You know, every time I hear the story, I mean, the fact that you lost 3 children is just unfathomable. And I think it's important that we continue to tell these sort of human stories. I think we get caught up in numbers a lot, but it's really important to never forget the impact, and all that you've gone through is just unbelievable. Martha, I wanted to go back to you. You talked about the devastating and heartbreaking impact of losing your mom at 5 years old. After that, it would be several years, I believe 9 years later, you would test positive for HIV. Can you talk a little bit about when you first learned about your status, and how did your family react to the news?
So I first got to learn about my HIV status. I was 14 years, and actually one of the factors that really sent me to have my first test, because I really grew up in a family where my dad was very protective, so we did not always get the privilege to take ourselves to the hospital. While I do recognize that the schools we went to, there was always mandate whereby you had to issue out medical records, medical examination, the school administration. My dad did that for every term and all the times we went to school. But of course, we only had one family doctor. So I remember that one afternoon, my twin brother had sex, I think, weeks ago, and we were supposed to report back to school. So he was a little bit scared. He was like, I've heard about HIV. What if we go for this test and then I figure out, I'm positive? That will kill me. Like, you could see the fear in his face. So me being the bold one, I was like, hey, bro, like, let me walk you in this journey, and we go. And then also because with me as a young girl, I really grew up, I'd engaged in a number of activities at school. I want to think that activism for me really began at a tender age. So my boldness, but also my knowledge, sent me supporting my twin brother to have the test. And even when we walked into this facility, I was 101% sure that for me, I was safe. I was negative because at that age, I'd not engaged in any sexual intercourse. There was nothing. But also still the naivety that we grew up knowing that for one to get infected with HIV or even to live with HIV, you must have been engaged in sexual intercourse. You must be very promiscuous. And I think that is still the narrative till now in Africa. So I escorted my twin brother, and we had the test together. I was confident. I was comforting him. I was telling him, oh, things would be okay, nothing to worry about. The results show up, and my twin brother's results were aired out, like they told him you're negative, and then mine were held. So this counselor walks to me and says, what's your name, Martha? So, you know, she played around. I'm like, please tell me my results. What are my HIV results? I need to know. And this lady says, you're too young. We may not open up your results. So I over insisted, and she broke the news to me. I remember at that time breaking down. I did not have answers. I froze for some time. I was like, it's impossible. I even told the counselors at that moment that these are not my results. These are my twin brother's results. It is him who has messed up his life. It is not me. So I told them we need to have a test. So we had tests 3 times confirming, and it was positive. So we went home, and when we arrived at home, my dad was very, very bitter. Like, my dad was very furious. He was like, what were you looking for? What did you go here for? Like, you know, that blame game that some parents tend to shift to the kids in order to protect them. My dad was that aggressive. Not until the following morning, where I managed to sit with one of my stepmoms, and she was telling me, okay, look here, we're going to go to the hospital, we will figure it out. If you're positive, we will start on treatment. You know, me and your dad, we are. And that day in the evening, that's when we sat down, and my dad told me, you're too young. There are things you will not get to know, but you'll get to learn all these things in the long run. But for now, start on treatment. Even at the start of treatment, I remember I started on Septrin that I took for almost 6-7 years before I was then enrolled on the ARVs. So that was the experience. It was quite a rough one to know at that age, but also naively, because even the questions I had were not answered. And even at the point, my dad telling me, do not tell anyone, do not even tell your siblings. And I remember I opened up to my siblings after 2 years. But of course, I felt the stigma of even them telling me, oh, so you messed up your life? Huh? This is how you got yourself infected? It was even hard for me to start telling them. Dad told me, this is how I was born. Because these are things you cannot explain. And I want to feel like that is one of the challenges I continue to suffer till now, me being the last born of 8, and I have a twin brother who is not infected, and I am infected. And the question most people will always ask is, how is that even possible? Like, so it is hard to explain, but I want to believe that I am a miracle baby, and I think I was just born for a purpose. And I am glad that I found that purpose in what I do right now, to really be able to support a number of women, a number of young people who have gotten infected with HIV, or even who are living with HIV, for them to know that the question is not in how you got infected with HIV. The question is in how can we support you to live a more fulfilled life, to live a more happy life, to just be yourself. So people should stop asking the wrong questions of how did you get infected? It doesn't matter. What matters is how am I coping up? How am I living so beautifully? How am I thriving? How am I this beautiful story and able to be my true authentic self? I think that should be the right question to ask. Thank you.
I was thinking the same thing as you were telling the story, is how do you move from that stigma to just being supportive, right? Like that's what we all need to be doing. And it's amazing stories like yours and Connie's that are, you know, and the activists like you that are going to help us get there, and forums like this that are giving the opportunity to bring that story to life. So thank you very much for sharing that. Connie, back over to you. I do think of you every October 13th. But can we talk about October 13th, 2004 specifically? Um, that is why that was such an important one. Everybody,
October 13.
can you, Connie, can you get a little
Oh,
bit
what?
closer? Your microphone's a little bit muffled. So if you could just maybe get a little bit closer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
October 13. So October 13 happens to be my birthday, and at October, so I was born twice. And the reason why I say this is my mother gave me October 13, 20, and October 15, 2004 at the time that I started taking. So I would say it's a day that I was given a new leaf. The day I was given a rebirth. It is the day that I was given a chance to live then. Because before then, like I told you, earlier in the year, I had tested positive and on medication then because my CD4 count was high. And then I needed treatment in October. And when I had CD4 count then earlier, I was found the CD4 count was so 200. And with that CD4 count, I was supposed to be having some protection. And I did not do any. I never felt anything apart from the TB. I had TB, but I was mobile. I was not bedridden. So I was never bedridden at any time. And when I was told that I needed to start taking my medication, I think it was on the 10th or 11th of October. But I thought I was sick because I was not sick. And it really took a lot of time for them to think that I really need to. And one thing that other thing,
You know what,
or would
Connie?
you rather take
Connie,
a
I'm going to
medication?
stop you for just 1 second. Martha, can you go on? Martha, I think some of your feedback, Connie's muffled. You got mute, Martha? Great. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
So as I was saying, I say that I was actually challenged and said, you want to be bedridden before you start taking medication. So the dangers of starting taking your medication while you're bedridden is that you do not know how your body is going to react to your medication. And the side effects will just be too strong for you because you are weak from being you would end up dying. Or would you rather start taking your medication while you're still strong and healthy before you fall sick? And of course, no one really would want to fall sick. So I agreed to start taking medication, and I started taking medication on my birthday. And this year, it will mark 18 years of me taking my ARVs. I have taken them faithfully, and it has really helped me because, like I said, I had HIV from the beginning, but I was never sick to a point where I needed to be admitted or I needed to have to be bedridden even in the house. Never. So even after I took started taking my medication, I did not need to sleep or to be in bed because I was sick. I've never been. And 18 years down the line, I'm still as healthy as ever. I think even healthier than some people that are negative.
It's amazing. Well, I will for 13 years. Day of birth, I guess is what we call it. But yeah, really incredible, Connie. Martha, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk a little bit diagnosed, sort of what your treatment experience was like. And I know you were on before, so you'll probably have to unmute yourself. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Am I muted?
You're good.
Oh, sorry. So I really began treatment at a tender age, as I said, 14, but also naively. And I remember the first health facility that I went to. It had nothing to do with provision of youth-friendly services. That even the counselor who attended to me was this old woman, telling me things, and I was like, what is this? And for me, it was about take the pill and go. So they give me this Septrin. I didn't even know how to take it. And it was crazy. I had to go back to school and hide, and just make sure that take. And I remember at certain points, I began to really abuse my treatment, and at that point, I also began to do overdoses, as a way of taking my life. And because I did not get that intensive counseling at the point of being initiated to the first treatment, which was Septrin, I really became a suicidal child, and I always feel quite ashamed to say I have been a survivor of suicide for the 8 times, but also it gives me the pride to say that, well, I survived, and here I am. I can triumph through all these moments. But of course, when I was 16, 17 years, I then get introduced to TASO. And with TASO, it was clear there were systems, there were these young people that I got to meet. And it was quite interesting that even at the point of inception there, and these young people see me and they're like, are you part of us? Are you really living with HIV? And I was the timid one, and they're like, oh my God, she's so cute, she's this. And I think at that moment, that was a wake up call for me. I looked at these kids, many of them were suffering with their treatment, many of them were suffering from resistance, many of them were not doing well. But of course, the hospital had all these supportive systems. And I was like, how about I be that one individual who can really inspire and empower my fellow young people to do something. So we began a small drama club to really support, and through that we were able to have treatment literacy classes to just speak about it. But even me, to share with them that, well, I'm at school, when you're living with HIV, you can be in school. And it was quite unfortunate to note that most of these adolescents had been denied the chance to be in school by their parents because of their HIV status. And there was me, the Martha Clara, with the privilege in school, but also living with HIV. And so it was about starting something that could keep them more busy, but also support us to take our treatment with pride, with happiness. And that's how we began with the drama clubs at TASO, all this. And along the years till now, we're still in touch, supporting each other to take our treatment and all this. But the most amazing thing was about us owning it and knowing that no counselor, no doctor is going to come to your door and tell you, take your treatment. But we as the peers, we can be experts to support each other, to even share our stories, how the drugs are treating you. We are different, so they will treat us differently. And that was really beautiful. But to also recognize that the different funders, the Global Fund, PEPFAR, including you, Red, who are really doing amazing work to bring these stories, they did provide us the platforms to share our stories, or even to reach out to very, very many young people to share our stories. And for me, that is how my purpose and my career began. And that is why I do what I do right now, because those opportunities of getting exposed, to meet different young people, to talk to them, to share your stories with them, they have really impacted many lives for those young people. But they have also kept me as Martha to know that I am alive, and because I am, many young people living with HIV get the hope to be alive, but they also get that inspiration to know if Martha Clara did it with all these suicide attempts, with all that, I can still triumph off the stigma. I may not really speak more or even put my shoes in the lives that Connie and the people in her era experienced. I am not of that generation, but I must say that I experienced and I saw what my mother lived through. But even for many women of her age who did not have that chance, my mom did not take treatment because of the stigma, but because of the anger and the denial. But right now, because there is that information that me as Martha, but even more women like Connie, are able to reach out to other young women, I am certain that we can do much and really not have more young women getting infected with HIV, or even those that have it, they are able to live lives that are happy, more fulfilled. They are able to have families, and stigma should not be in the way of them thriving. But for even those young women who desire to be mothers, like myself, we are able not to give birth to children who are living with HIV. And for me, that is my hope. I fight for that and I stand to that. Thank you.
It's really incredible, in all the time that I've spent in different clinics on the ground there, I feel like it's the people sharing their stories that are just so impactful and so important, and people getting out there and telling their stories, just like you guys are. I think you know, you both have two somewhat different stories, but at the end of the day, it's so important for people to hear it and hear it from the people who have gone through it, and experiences. So again, I'm just so grateful that you guys are doing that and that we have this platform to provide in order to share it more broadly. You know, talk a little bit about the work that you both do each and every day. Connie, I know that you're at the Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. Can you talk a little bit about what a typical day is like for you, Connie?
Okay, maybe let me start from the beginning. When I tested positive, I wanted to learn more about HIV. I really didn't have any information. I didn't know how it is attacking my body and how it's going to destroy my body. So I volunteered to start working at the HIV clinic, one of the first clinics that was opened in Zambia, the free clinic. And I learned a lot. And, you know, when you are at home, you think that your story is pathetic, your story is miserable. But when you go into the facility, you meet all these different people and you see what they're going through, and then you even feel that you're better off than they are. That is the situation that I found myself. Quite all right, I had lost 2 children. And I just thought that I should use myself as an example to other women that were actually pregnant so that they see the pain that I had gone through and they can make a decision to actually do something about it so that they do not go through the same situation that I went through. And basically, I was going there to encourage them to test. And if they were found positive, to take their medication so that they cannot be able to pass on HIV to their children. And I'm proudly saying this. I had managed to reach out to a lot of women who ended up having children that were HIV negative. So right now, I'm working for an organization called CIDAS, the Center for Infectious Diseases Research in Zambia, um, under a project called CETA. CETA is Common Elements Treatment Approach. What we are doing as CETA is offering counseling to people that are HIV positive, that are having psychological issues. You know, right now, I would safely say that there's a lot of psychological issues in everyone these days because of what is going on around the world. With HIV, with COVID, with poverty, everything. People are affected psychologically in many different ways. And basically, we are targeting people that are HIV positive right now because we have realized that a person that is living with HIV is living a challenge already. And they are passing through a lot of things and they really need help. Taking medication for the rest of your life is not something easy. And people would tend to give up at a certain point, maybe because they are tired, because they have to change their lifestyle, maybe they are facing resistance from their family and different other situations that are leading them to stop taking their medication. So we've come with a SETA, which was started by John Hopkins University in the United States. And it's actually working very well because a lot of people are getting help. There are people that we've had that are suicidal, that have suicidal ideation, that are traumatized maybe because of losing people that were HIV positive, like Martha there, where she lost the mother when she was really young. And that's really very traumatizing. And you do not know how it can affect someone if they're growing up. So apart from that, there are different elements that we actually use um, on a daily basis. And because of COVID, we are actually doing the counseling in 2 ways. We can have the counseling in person where somebody walks into the clinic and then they're able to see a counselor who they will sit with and then they will have a discussion. So it's not everyone that is HIV positive that is required to undergo CETA because it's not everyone that needs help. So those that need help will actually undergo a screening session where we are going to see how much they score and see if they need CETA. So that can be done in person or it can be done via telephone. And we introduced the phone because of COVID, where people would not come to the clinic, but they still needed help. So we started offering what we call telesita, where we talk to people over the phone and we encourage them to go on, and then maybe they had actually even stopped medication and then we put them back on medication. Some would have a high viral load because they're not taking their medication properly because of certain issues. Maybe they're in depression and things like that. And we help such people so that we can bring them back to the clinic and they can be able to start taking their medication.
It's amazing. I mean, when you think about the progress that's gone from, you know, getting people on treatment to now sort of counseling them and helping them understand even beyond just the treatment and the medications, but the societal impact and the emotional impact, it's so important. And it's so great to hear that you guys are taking that full approach. Martha, over to you. I know you've been involved in the Her Voice Fund as an ambassador. You've been a community action facilitator for the We Lead program. Can you talk also a little bit about what a day is like for you?
So I'll speak more broadly on the two programs that I've been glad to really have been part of. On the Her Voice Fund side, I just exited office to another young woman, but of course I've worked with them for the last 5 years, yeah. And I'm now a Her Voice Fund mentor. And really it was about understanding that adults and girls and young women, really we own the burden of the HIV infections in sub-Saharan Africa, but also recognizing that our voices remain left behind. They are not heard for even programs or even initiatives that we feel that we want, that we also feel like would really place us at the forefront on engaging policymakers, stakeholders on what we want regarding, you know, protection, respect of our rights, and really ensuring that we are safe and free of new HIV infections. So through the Her Voice Fund, it was really about how we can create more massive voices at all level, grassroots communities of adults and girls and young women to take up leadership spaces, to engage more meaningfully on different mechanisms. An example is like the Global Fund Country Coordinated Mechanism, but also looking deeper on taking co-working groups of the different ministries, maybe Ministry of Gender in my country, Ministry of Health, and really dialoguing with them and making them more accountable, but also ensuring that the services that are provided to young people are of quality, are efficient, and services are able to be reached out to all adults and girls and young women. And I am proud to note that even the Y Plus network has played a bigger role on ensuring that our voices do not only end at the country level or even the community level, where we, the Her Voice Fund ambassadors, have been keen to pick up those voices, but those voices are sent more broadly at the global level. I am humbled that I've been one of those young women that have actively and passionately advocated for policy development, you know, advocacy forums, spoke on a number of different forums on issues concerning adults and girls and young women in Africa, and really why stakeholders need to stand up to them. I've been part of the We've Got the Power report by the UNAIDS, where really we looked at the agenda of the adults and girls and young women as we move forward, ending the pandemic, but also the epidemic that continues to take over many of our lives. I've also engaged in the Global Fund replenishment for 2019. I was part of the Faces of the Fight, and even for this year, fighting for what counts, committing myself to really lobby with different countries, with stakeholders, to know that COVID-19 has taught us a lesson. We are now not about fighting the pandemics or invest here, invest here. We need to think of more ways on how we need to invest deeper and be very deliberate on building resilient health systems, sustainable health systems, or even locally owned initiatives that are embraced by the community. Because at the end of the day, what works for the community is what they will embrace and really take on. And maybe to also share that given even now as my role as the Community of Action for the We Lead program is about understanding that we cannot speak about HIV, we cannot even fight it if we fail to address existing gender inequalities, if we fail to integrate sexual reproductive health and rights, and if we really fail to address the human rights barriers. So the We Lead program is deliberate to still build a momentum of young women in their respective diversities, young women living with HIV, those with disability, those who identify as LBTI, and then even those who are affected by displacement or who are refugees, for us to understand that it is not our differences, you know, it is not our differences that really disunite us. It is just our inability to understand those differences. But even for us to know that we are all fighting one battle, marginalization, these communities are left behind. They are shattered. They are not heard. Many communities of young women continue to not be heard, especially those who are like, the key populations, who we prefer to call that, but even where we are deliberate to look at our culture and religious values, and we blind our eyes to the realities, and we cannot normalize discrimination. We cannot normalize exclusion of these communities. So throughout all these programs, we are able to make sure that young women are at the center. And for me, every day when I wake up, it's about organizing these communities of adolescent girls and young women, ensuring that they know what they want. They are able to find avenues of engaging policymakers, but also importantly, identifying different platforms where we can create seats for ourselves, because, well, in some platforms they may deliberately not give us those seats, but we will show up, and when we show up we will speak, and they will notice us, and when we speak they'll be able to know that these are not only young people making noise, but these are young professionals who are able to diplomatically dialogue, who are informed, who know what they want. And for me, I want to feel like that is the narrative that we now want to let African leaders know. This is the time for them to create more space for young blood, for us to work with them. We are tired of being beneficiaries. Like, we want to be their partners. We want to be partners. We want to work with them. So for me, my job every day is around that. People understanding, policymaker understanding that youth-led adult partnership is the way to go. We need to share those decisions, on an equal basis. We may disagree, but we always need to figure out areas on where we agree. But also noticing that rights come with responsibilities, and responsibilities come with commitment. So part of the work that I also do is supporting the different young women to all know that nothing will be done for you without you being on that platform. And part of my work is really around providing leadership to them, mentorship classes, and creating a leap forward of them knowing that I can be a leader. I can start small and grow into that person I dream of being. So we also do a lot of social accountability for ourselves. How do we make ourselves accountable? Is Martha doing her job? Maybe I am, but am I doing it in the right way? And also knowing that we have played our role, and so the stakeholders need to step up. And really our slogan now is that enough of the talking. Like, we've had a lot of talking. We want policymakers, we want presidents, we want everyone with power, anyone with power to influence, to drive change, to get to action. Let's get to action. That is our slogan now. So that is a brief about my work.
I love it, and I love the passion. And I have to say, as a mom to a teenage boy and a teenage son, I spend a lot of time with teenagers and adolescents, and I have never been more inspired than the adolescents that I've met through the programs on the ground in various countries throughout the continent. I mean, it's just so impressive. And to your point, like, they're going to have to be out there and talking, and they're going to be heard, but talking, but then also doing the work. So incredible work that you're doing, and so many others that I've been so privileged to meet. Connie, I'm going to go over to you before we move into our last question. But speaking of teenagers, little Labona, I know she's only 10, but she sometimes feels only 10. Can you talk a little bit about Labona? Labona, very, very special girl is.
You mean that 10-year-old little old lady? HIV and children. Like Martha has said, it's really something that you have to think about seriously when you're HIV positive and you want to have a child. It creates a lot of problems in your mind of talking with other people, within yourself, because you really have to think about it seriously. And in my line of work, we're also dealing with adolescents, and these are some of the issues that we encounter, where these young men and women who want, they are actually going into depression because they feel they'll never find love, they'll never get into a relationship, they'll never have children because they've got HIV. And a lot of people really think that it's not possible for an HIV positive to have a negative child. But with medicines on board, it's actually very positive. I said in the beginning, I was actually encouraging women to take their medicines so that they can be able to have children that are negative. But personally, I was really scared. I was really scared of trying again to have a child. And it took me 16 years from the time that I lost my last child to actually make a decision to try to have another child. And as I was about it, I really thought that if this child turned to be positive, I would never forgive myself. But I had a lot of factors. One, I knew that I was adherent to medication. And being adherent to medication, I knew that I had suppressed my viral load to levels where it cannot be detected. And those were very good signs. And looking at my CD4 count, my CD4 count was very high, higher actually than a person that is negative. That time, my CD4 count was 1,368. And when I got the results, I had to sit down with my doctor, who told me that, you know what? This is the last time that I'm going to talk to you about this. If you miss this opportunity, one, you're not getting any younger. It will be very difficult for you to fall pregnant. So I would like you to try to have another child. And I thought about it. That time we were talking, I think I was 41 years old, and I wasn't getting any younger really. So I said, okay, let me try this one more time. I'll put in extra effort to make sure that I do not give HIV to my child. And we count it all joy. In 2012, in November, I gave birth to a healthy little girl who I had tested after 6 weeks, and she actually turned out to be negative. This is now 10 years down the line. She's there, she's negative, and thank God for that. So really, it's very possible for a person that is HIV positive, who is adhering, number one, before you even think of taking up the challenge of having a child, you have to be sure that you are adhering to your medication. You have to make sure you sit with your doctor. You make sure everything is okay. You are taking your medicines all the time. Your viral load is undetectable. As long as your viral load is undetectable, you will not pass on HIV to a child. And that is a responsibility that you need to take up as a parent. Take up your medicines. Make sure you are able to keep it down so that the HIV will not affect the child. And it's possible. So it's really up to you. If you know that you're positive, take your drugs faithfully, and then think of the child later. Thank you.
I mean, it's the most incredible story in of how it has come full circle for you, Connie, the devastation of losing 3 children and then having, taking that, making that tough decision about whether to have another, and then having Labona test negative. And, will go on to do amazing things if I know anything about her so far. So one last question, Martha, you talked a bit about the Global Fund and the replenishment and the work that's underway. For our audience coming up this fall, There will be a Global Fund Replenishment Conference where governments and companies, the private sector and others will be pledging support for the next 3 years. Connie, you were with us. I mean, you've been with me for a number of replenishments, but most recently you were with me in France when it was hosted by President Macron in 2019. This year, President Biden will be hosting the conference in September. And I guess at this point, you know, knowing that RED is all about bringing the private sector into this fight, but also it's about the private sector and the governments coming together. I would just love to know, what would you say, you know, to the Global Fund and to others actually about the work that is being done and the importance of it? Martha, I will start with you.
So first and foremost, I really want to send out my utmost appreciation to all the partners who are doing a lot, who are dedicating their lives to ensure that developing countries like Africa, but even people like me, they do not know about, or even me who's representing the pictures of those communities living with HIV, those who continue to suffer a number of vulnerabilities, and how your programmings or even the different services that you provide to us, that you continue to invest in those initiatives, how they are changing our lives. It is an investment that I do not take for granted. Even the many young women that I work with do not take for granted. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that generosity. For me then to share that it is about us now as we move forward. We only have 9 years, and we know we've made a target of ending AIDS, you know, or even the new infections by 2030. Now is the time for us to think deeper and know that the last 30, 40 years we have talked about an HIV still here. There are communities that are still grappling with AIDS-related deaths. We need to harmonize our data. We need to invest in data and have a more evidence-driven programming. We need to invest in getting to know those data, but also to know that these epidemics belong to the community. They belong to the communities. And this is a tough talk that we need to have for even governments to know that the communities are the face of the burden of the epidemics of HIV, all the gender inequalities, and all those that come to play. How can we strengthen the affluence or even the positioning of the communities to sustain those resilient health systems? We need to move away from just numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers, but look deeper on what those numbers say. You know, what those numbers say for the communities of adult girls and young women, what those programs say and how they have influenced the programs of young women. So we need to invest deeper in our data management, invest deeper in holistic approaches that center and put communities that are most affected, especially communities of adolescent girls and young women, communities of the population that remain marginalized, the LGBTI communities in Africa, but all those at play. And for us to know that we need to now think deeper on approaches that are driven by evidence. Evidence is the way to go. And the last thing is about making ourselves accountable. Quite absurd to note that even now as I speak to you in Uganda, our health system, much of it is donor funded. That is unacceptable. It is not, it is unacceptable, because then what happens when at a point you wake up and you know you're not able to respond enough? I think at this moment, as we go to the replenishment, it's a conversation that we need countries, especially African countries.
Oh, thank you, Martha. You broke up at the end, but everything else that you said was absolutely spot on. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's so helpful for you to bring it into life. And I think all of your points that you made about data being important, the implications of data, but also moving beyond the numbers and understanding that these are human beings and we are all in this together, and making sure those stories are coming through. So I think we lost Connie, but that's okay because we are just about to wrap up. I want to absolutely thank you, Martha, for joining us. I will certainly thank Connie. I will reach out to her, but I just want to close saying that it's really clear from the stories that we're hearing today that the AIDS fight is far from over. It is going to take a lot of work for us to continue to build this equitable world, but also, as you talked about, Martha, the importance of strengthening our health systems, which sometimes sounds a little bit wonky, but when you understand the impact of having health systems that can sustain pandemics like AIDS and COVID, that we need to invest in. We will be doing that, and that's what Red's here for. We're here to bring the companies, to be the cavalry, to come in there and make sure we're generating not just money, to your point, not just the donations, but also creating heat, making sure people understand these stories, making sure they understand the importance of these fights that are not over. And that we have a lot of work to do. So I want to thank you again, Martha, for joining us. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I hope to see you again very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.